Good morning and thank you for joining us on Africa This Morning. It is Tuesday, the 29th of April 2014. My name is Beryl. Ooro. Let's start the bulletin with a look at the leading stories.
Egypt's trials. Egyptian judge recommends death penalty for hundreds of people, including Muslim Brotherhood leader Mohamed Badie. MPs petition. CORD MPs petition Parliament over the IEBC. The U.S. tornado. At least 17 people killed by tornadoes in the U.S. The MERS virus. The Middle East respiratory syndrome virus outbreak spreads to Egypt.
An Egyptian court has recommended the death sentence for the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood and 682 supporters and handed down a final capital punishment ruling for 37 others.
The defendants sentenced on Monday were accused of involvement in the murder and attempted murder of policemen in the southern Minya province on August 14th, the day police officers killed hundreds of ousted President Mohamed Morsi's supporters in clashes in Cairo. Army soldiers and police manned checkpoints around the court in the city as family members gathered outside. There were emotional scenes outside the court after the ruling was handed down, as relatives of those convicted wept and protested the innocence of their loved ones. Another court also banned a pro-democracy movement that helped ignite the uprising that removed Hosni Mubarak from power. The court was ruling on a private lawsuit brought by a lawyer accusing the April 6th movement of damaging the image of the state and illegal contact with foreigners. April 6th was one of the youth movements that harnessed social media to bring people into the streets for the historic January 25th, 2011 protests that led to Mubarak's downfall at the height of the Arab Spring uprisings.
Two Kenyans have petitioned Parliament calling for the removal of 9 IEBC commissioners from office. The Kenyans handed over their petition to a group of minority leaders who will present it on their behalf to Parliament. Sam Gakunyi with the details.
1 year after Kenyans went to the polls, the dust is yet to settle, and there are those still casting doubts on the credibility of the general elections.
In accordance with Article 251 of the Kenyan Constitution, two Kenyans have come out to petition the disbandment of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. They have cited incompetence and gross misconduct of 9 members as their top reason for the petition.
Article 251 of the Constitution outlines the process by which the President shall receive a petition from Parliament and thereby appoint a tribunal to investigate matters raised. The two petitioners, namely Robert Bule Wafula and Engineer Justus Wamutura, want to draw the attention of the National Assembly to what they call serious violations of the Constitution. They fault the IEBC on how they conducted the registration of voters and the management of the 2013 elections.
In the exercise of the registration of voters and compilation of voters register, and in the conduct of the general election of 2013, the commissioners, A, are in serious violation of the Constitution and the laws of Kenya. B, gross misconduct in performance of the functions and their duties as commissioners.
The petitioners also claim the IEBC mismanaged public finances in procuring the biometric voter registers. They now want the National Assembly to do the following.
1, resolves that this petition discloses grounds for removal of the named commissioners. 2, recommend to His Excellency, the President, to form a tribunal to investigate the named commissioners.
Waiting to receive the petition were a group of MPs.
And therefore, the grounds are set in the petition. Our role as members of the National Assembly is to take this petition and proceed with it in accordance with the provisions of Article 221, Section 221, 222, 223, and 230 of our standing orders.
The Jubilee coalition is against any move by the opposition to disband the electoral body. Reporting for Ooro Africa Prime Time News in Nairobi, I'm Sam Gakunyi.
To matters agriculture still in Kenya, Agricultural Cabinet Secretary Felix Koskei has admitted that there is an influx of duty-free sugar imports. He, however, says the government has put measures in place to stop the illegal imports that are posing a serious threat to the sugar sector.
The Ministry of Agriculture has been holding in their stores 28,000 to 30,000 tons of sugar that is not moving out to the market. The ministry therefore estimates that this is the same amount of sugar that is illegally imported to Kenya for the readily available market.
And why is sugar coming in is because, again, it is taking advantage of our high cost of production in the country. Because the cost of production of sugar in the country is very high, that whatever sugar that is out there is cheap from whichever destination.
Aware of this challenge that hurts the Kenyan farmer, the ministry has partnered with the Kenya Revenue Authority, the Kenya Bureau of Standards and the National Police Service to carry out surveillance in the country. According to the Cabinet Secretary, the efforts are bearing fruit.
We are seeing the prices going up of our sugar from our factories, which indicates that the demand now is higher than the supply.
Meanwhile, the Cabinet Secretary has refuted claims by the Parliamentary Agriculture Committee that the recently launched 1.7 million acre Galana Kalalo irrigation scheme has stalled.
We've been busy finalizing designs which have been finalized, right from the irrigation infrastructure, water sources, land use planning is finalized. So the next stage now is procurement of construction, contractors to do the construction.
He was speaking after flagging off 19 vehicles to be used in East Africa Agricultural Productivity Project. The project, partly funded by the World Bank, will focus on 4 East African countries through their centers of excellence, namely the dairy sector in Kenya, wheat sector in Ethiopia, cassava sector in Uganda, and rice sector in Tanzania. Reporting for Ooro Africa News in Nairobi, I'm Sam Gakunyi.
To matters health, nurses in Kenya threatening to go on strike if the government fails to employ more officers. They also want the Ministry of Health to post nurse interns to various health institutions in the country.
National Union of Nurses officials say they will organize a sit-in at the Ministry of Health headquarters if the government fails to absorb all nurses who have cleared school, as well as hire 40,000 nurses to enhance service delivery.
And if the government does not hire 40,000 nurses, we as a union, we shall consider to call a national strike on an item of hiring nurses. For the issue of the nurse interns that are supposed to be posted, there are 350. If next week the government will not have posted these nurses, we shall lead these nurses to Afya House and we shall camp there until these nurses are posted.
The nurses are also raising concern over the rising cases of insecurity. Seth Panyako from the union says several nurses have been attacked while on duty and wants the police to take action against the culprits.
As the nurse had finished attending to the mother and settling down the mother and came to attend to this police officer, the police officer bounced on this nurse and slapped this nurse and beat this nurse, and the nurse went to a P3 form, was treated, and the matter was reported at Serem police station. And we are asking ourselves, are police officers above the law? So we are saying this police officer should be arrested, should be arraigned in court within 48 hours.
The nurses also want the Ministry of Health to ensure all hospitals are well equipped.
With Kenya's population growing at a rate of 2.67% annually, it places a huge demand on the health services in the country and especially maternal health care. This poses a huge challenge to the Ministry of Health, considering at least 20% of Kenyans cannot access quality health care due to financial challenges. Ooro Africa's news reporter Agnes Kakunga with more on that story.
With heavy reliance on funding where key health programs are over 70% financed by donors, this is a clear indication that the Ministry of Health in Kenya is yet to fully satisfy the 46% of Kenyans who live below poverty line. Among them, 19% can barely afford quality medical services.
Ensuring sustainable financing for essential services and delivering them through the overstretched Kenya health system remains a major challenge. Achieving universal health coverage in developing countries, including Kenya, can be very challenging. This is because of the financial constraints that we face.
But this might be past tense now with the launch of the Health for All campaign that is geared towards building a strong and active constituency towards supporting government's efforts to achieve universal health coverage. For instance, the health insurance scheme coverage is low. It currently stands at 10% of Kenya's population. This poses a huge challenge to the health sector that, according to the Health Cabinet Secretary, requires immediate attention.
Previously, we are losing 5,500 mothers every year as a result of pregnancy-related diseases and illnesses. So as a result of the drop in mortality by 8%, it means we are saving 500 mothers every year. Even more important, the child mortality rate in the first 9 months after the intervention has dropped by 15.3%. Previously, the statistics show that we used to lose 100,000 children every year below 5 years.
Though the Kenyan government has received $88 million from the Geneva-based Global Fund to boost the fight against malaria in prone areas, Kenya needs to pursue different avenues to mobilize domestic health financing that will be allocated towards other diseases that continue to be a threat to its population. Over 60% of Kenyans live in rural areas where the infrastructure for communication and health services are poorly developed.
Egypt's health minister has announced emergency measures to contain the potential spread of the Middle East respiratory syndrome after it was announced on Saturday that one Egyptian case has been discovered. The disease has already claimed 90 lives.
Egyptian Health Minister Adel Adawi convened a meeting of health officials and other experts to look into preventive measures to deal with the so-called coronavirus, which he said was contracted by an Egyptian citizen who had recently returned from Saudi Arabia. The virus, which can cause coughing, fever and pneumonia, has spread from the Gulf to Europe and has already caused over 90 deaths.
As you know, Egypt has received a case yesterday, or the day before yesterday, of a 27-year-old man who works in Saudi Arabia and is suffering from the coronavirus. The case has been quarantined based on information from his family members who said that he had spent time with some relatives in Saudi Arabia who were affected by the coronavirus. He was directed to the fever hospital in Abasia and samples were extracted as agreed upon.
Adawi said there was heightened concern about the potential spread of the virus because many Egyptians will be making religious pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia during the coming months.
We are reaching a stage where the number of pilgrims is increasing, followed by the Hajj season. Saudi Arabia has the highest number of coronavirus-infected people. Consequently, there are certain procedures that will be followed when it comes to tracking the virus. Thank God we have a high-quality tracking system so that all citizens are assured of knowing what we are tracking, all symptoms that are created by this virus.
Although the number of mass infections worldwide is fairly small, the more than 40% death rate among confirmed cases and the spread of the virus beyond the Middle East is keeping scientists and public health officials on alert.
What we care about is spreading awareness of the travelers, and there will be coordination between travel agencies that are transporting the Umrah pilgrims to and from Saudi Arabia. This is to have complete awareness of whoever is suffering from the high fever, or if there is a possibility of being infected by a respiratory disease, to present himself to the quarantine administration to take all preventative.
He said extra measures to identify those infected and raise awareness amongst the other travelers will be taken. Saudi authorities have invited 5 leading international vaccine makers to collaborate with them in developing a mass vaccine. But virology experts argue that this makes little sense in public health terms.
To North America, at least 10 people have been killed after powerful tornadoes tore across the southern United States of Arkansas and Oklahoma.
The Arkansas Department of Emergency Management said there were 8 storm-related fatalities, while an official with the Oklahoma Emergency Management Agency said there were at least 2 tornado victims in the state. Local emergency crews were combing through the debris in some of the hardest hit towns, as forecasters warned that more twisters were on their way. The full impact of the storm and its toll is not yet known. In Oklahoma, a powerful twister struck the town of Cupo. Homes and buildings were left damaged and destroyed. The National Weather Service warned of a severe weather threat, saying there was a high risk of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes overnight across much of Arkansas.
And finally, OCD, as commonly known, stands for obsessive-compulsive disorder. It is a spectrum disorder involving a person doing one thing over and over to a neurotic degree. But those suffering from this disorder know what they do, and they often shy or hide themselves from society or their family members. Our reporter Miriam Kanyugo tells us more about this disorder and ways to manage it if not overcome it.
Obsessions are unwelcome thoughts, images, urges or doubts that repeatedly appear in someone's mind. For example, thinking that one has been contaminated by dirt and germs, or thoughts of having left the gas or stove on and need to check it fast. Compulsions, on the other hand, are repetitive activities that somebody feels they have to do. This could be something like repeatedly checking a door to make sure it is locked, or repeating a specific phrase in one's head to prevent harm coming to a loved one. The aim of a compulsion is to try and deal with the distress caused by the obsessive thoughts and relieve the anxiety one is feeling. However, the process of repeating these compulsions is often distressing, and any relief felt is often short-lived.
It's what's called a spectrum disorder. In other words, it runs from very, very serious to completely and utterly normal. You know, like you've got a touch of it every single day, like if you leave the house and worry if you've left the gas on or whether you locked the door. At one end, you've got people who just do slightly bothersome things, like they insist on having their magazines exactly square on the coffee table, or they only buy things in threes, or they must always, as they climb a set of stairs, they must always end up on the left foot. I know these all sound bizarre, but that's what happens. And a lot of them, I mean, for example, the guy who's coming up the stairs, if he's halfway up the stairs and he's calculated, because I'm afraid they do, that he's going to land on his right foot, he'll go down to the bottom and start again on the other foot.
The question is, what causes obsessive-compulsive disorder? Dr. Christopher Hart explains what causes obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Because sometimes it's triggered by an event, like somebody close has died in the family. Sometimes it's triggered by perhaps a really terrifying worry, like there's been an epidemic and the person has started worrying about infection. Sometimes it's triggered by things you can't really put your finger on. It just started sometime in their adolescence. Maybe they were stressed.
Although OCD is not pegged or associated to any culture or ethnic community, different cultures view it differently and sometimes stigmatize those suffering from OCD.
It's independent of culture. You find OCD all around the world in every culture, every nationality, every racial type, etc. But different cultures view it in different ways. So it's true that in Africa there'll be a certain stigma attached to this sort of thing, more so than in perhaps other areas. And that's just because of lack of information. People don't recognize it for what it is. It's worth saying that a lot of the things we do have got a little bit of OCD wrapped in them, and sometimes those things can take you over.
Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a mental condition that affects people of all walks of life. The biggest question remains, do people really know exactly what OCD is? And when does a cautious, normal behavior turn to be an obsession?
I don't know. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah, actually, I've got a friend. He takes a few hours to sleep than what he does checking around his house every now and then.
Obsessive-compulsive disorder is indeed a chronic but also a very treatable mental condition, but one should know exactly where to get treatment.
And the good news is that in almost all cases, you can treat it very, very well. That's one of the nice things about OCD. It's very easy to treat. He, must be somebody who uses a technique called cognitive behavioral therapy, because the approach for OCD is to use cognitive behavioral therapy, and particularly a thing called, it's called ERP, exposure ritual prevention. Now, that's a very well established technique in psychology, and it works. In fact, after you've shown somebody how to do it, they can do it themselves, and they go home and they treat themselves.
Persons with OCD often suffer from other anxiety disorders.
Which OCD is one. In fact, it's worth saying that people with OCD often have other disorders, like they may be very anxious, they may abuse substances like alcohol and things like that. There's often a little group of these that go together.
Individuals living with OCD experience a pathological doubt because they are unable to distinguish between what's possible, what's probable, and what's unlikely to happen. For Healthful Living, I'm Miriam Kanyugo.
That story brings us to the end of the Bulletin on Africa this morning. Join us next as we take a look at other stories making the lead on the social media platform on our segment on Trend.